So I thought this week I'd continue with my work on the different modes, this week focusing on the Lydian mode. So what I thought I'd cover this week are 5 different approaches or 5 different ways of playing over the Lydian mode. Now all of these approaches do stack on each other, so you can actually use all of them or a few of them at the same time. That's pretty much what I do when I'm playing over the Lydian mode. I've used all of these over the years as well. They all have pros and cons, so hopefully I'll go through that in some detail when I go over it as well. But let's start with the first way, the simplest way of playing over the Lydian mode, and I'll go into what the Lydian mode is then as well. So let's start with the C major scale then. I'll start with that C note on the root. So there's my C major scale, just 1 octave. So in order to construct the Lydian scale, what we do is we play all the notes of the major scale, but we start it on the 4th degree, or the 4th note, which is F in this case. So C starts here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my 4th degree. That gives me an F Lydian. And if we have a look at that, that contains all of the notes of the F major scale, apart from the 4th degree of that, and that's a raised 4th, so it has a sharp 4th in it. And that's really what characterises a Lydian scale. It's a major scale with a sharpened 4th. And so this gives you a way of being able to play the Lydian scale anywhere on the neck. If you already know how to play the major scale, then if you can find the 4th degree of any position and use that as a root note, then you're playing the Lydian scale. But of course it's not quite as easy as that, because if you just do that, then what tends to happen is that you're still thinking about the major root, and you start playing major licks rather than Lydian licks, and it all sounds a bit weird and wrong. And so there are ways of approaching this, and that's what I want to talk about next. Okay, so the Lydian mode is exactly the same as the major scale, but it's got this raised 4th degree, and that's the thing that turns a major scale into a Lydian mode. And that really leads us into our second approach for playing over the Lydian mode. Let's go through that. Okay, so the next approach is to start with the major scale and then raise the 4th degree, because we know that the Lydian is a major scale with a raised 4th. So if I work in my F major again, there's my root, there's my F major scale. But if I raise that 4th to a sharpen it, I get the Lydian scale. And this has a couple of advantages. Firstly, I'm now starting to think about that F root, so I'm aware of where my Lydian root note is. I'm not thinking in terms of C major anymore, I'm thinking in terms of F Lydian. And the other thing is, I'm very aware of where that sharp 4 is, which is where the colour comes from, if you like. This is a thing that says I'm a Lydian scale, so if you're aware of where all the sharp 4ths are, to play the Lydian mode. Of course, it has a couple of disadvantages. One is, if you're actually doing this, if you're working this out on the fly, it's actually quite difficult to do, to track where all the 4ths are and to sharpen them. And you start consciously focusing on that rather than the music that you're playing. So yes, this is a good approach, and a lot of people do this actually. It's a very common approach. But there are some things that we can do to help this. And there are also some things that we can do that will assist the first method as well. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so that's another way of thinking about the Lydian mode. Now actually, probably one of the most important concepts that I keep talking about when I talk about modes is modes are not just scales. Scales are just bunches of notes, if you can think of them like that. They're just collections of pitches. They have no intrinsic harmony to them. And a mode really is defined by the underlying harmony, not the collection of pitches that you use to play it. And so it's really important to understand the underlying harmony that you find in the mode, and also you can bring that into your playing as well. Once you start to emphasize the harmony that you find inside the mode, you start bringing out the mode, and the music that you play starts to fit the backing track so much better than if you don't really understand the underlying harmony. So let's dig into that. So looking at the chords then. The root chord in the Lydian scale, the chord based on the root note, is a major chord. So in this case I'm playing in F Lydian, so my root chord is F major, and the 7th chord is F major 7th. And the other really important chord when you're playing over the Lydian mode is the chord built on the 2nd degree. So the 2nd degree of F is G, and that's a major chord as well. And this progression from G to F or 2 to 1 is really important when you're playing over the Lydian tonality. Hopefully you can hear that. The other chord to be aware of is the sus augmented 4th, or the sus sharp 4, or the sharp 11th, which sounds like this. It's a really kind of a weird sounding chord, but it's a very Lydian chord as well. So this is kind of the Lydian equivalent of that sus 4 chord that you're probably well aware of, you know, from Crazy Little Thing Called Love, you know that. So if you did that in a Lydian mode, it would sound like this. Very different sound. So that augmented 4th, that sus 4 sound, or that sharp 11 sound, is really important. It really defines the Lydian sound as well. Okay, so if you know that, if you understand the harmony, you can bring that approach to bear over the first two. So if you understand the scales and you understand how the chords and the harmony fit on top of the scales, you can start to bring out the sound of the mode. Another way of doing this is to start with the pentatonic scale. The neat thing here is everyone understands the pentatonic scale because probably it was one of the first scales you ever learned. And so you can actually use the pentatonic scale as a starting point to play over modes. Let me demonstrate. Okay, so let's start with the pentatonic scale. As we're playing over a major chord, we use the pentatonic scale where the root note is played by your little finger if you're playing that first box. And as I'm working in F Lydian for all of this, my little finger line's on the 13th fret and gives me that pentatonic box just there. And you'll find this pentatonic box works perfectly fine over the F Lydian. So it gives you a good way of starting out or giving you a root position that you can build on. And what we can do is we can add the extra 2 notes. So a pentatonic scale contains 5 of the 7 notes that you'll find in the Lydian scale. And the 2 missing notes are the 7th, so it's a major 7th as normal, and then the 4th. Instead of playing a normal 4th, a perfect 4th there, we'll play the augmented 4th, that raised 4th, which makes the Lydian sound. But hopefully you can see all of this is in the context of that pentatonic box. So what I like to say is the pentatonic scale, if you like, gives you the meat and potatoes of the scale, and these extra 2 notes add the colour, add the flavouring that makes it Lydian or changes the mode that you're playing. And this is a very caged-like approach as well, understanding the scales in terms of the pentatonic position. But obviously you can use this over 3 notes per string or anything. Again, so you can take that idea and you can stack it on the other ideas as well. So if you understand the pentatonic scale, how that fits against the Lydian mode, if you start to understand the chords and how they fit over the Lydian mode, and then obviously you understand the mode itself, then all of this sort of builds on itself and gives you some real tools, some really powerful tools to be able to play over the Lydian mode. The final thing that you really need to work on, though, is your ear, to be able to hear the Lydian mode, to be able to hear that Lydian sound. And the best way I've been able to do this over the years is to firstly understand the major scale. Get to the place where you can sing the major scale out loud. And then start to understand that sharp fourth sound. And for me, that sharp fourth always wants to pull up to that fifth. It always feels like it needs to resolve, so that resolution of that sharp fourth is what I hear in my head when I'm thinking about the Lydian mode. So what you really want to do is to get to the place where you can hear the Lydian mode, where you can hear that sort of Lydian colour in what you're playing. And as soon as you get there, that plus the other 4 approaches that I've talked about will give you some really powerful tools to be able to play over Lydian. So anyway, I hope that's been useful for you, and we'll chat next time. Goodbye.